Who comes to mind when I ask you to think of a person who represents leadership effectiveness to you? They don't have to have had the title of leader, and your answer doesn't have to be grounded in particular research. What's most important is that you come up with someone who really has some personal meaning for you. Now, one of the persons that comes to mind for me is Frederick Douglass. I learned a lot about him throughout my life, starting in high school. And when I thought of making a connection between lessons of leadership from Frederick Douglass, I went to the internet and it took me right to a podcast by a Dr. Karen. I heartily encourage you to check that out. For me, one of the things that always struck me about Frederick Douglass is captured in this quote that's often used or shared about him. And the quote goes like this: those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men and women who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. When I came across that quote, it just had so much meaning to me, and actually it was one of the reasons why I did a drawing of him years ago. But to the point about the leadership attributes represented in that, what Frederick Douglass was capturing was this essence of, if there is going to be change, it is not accomplished without struggle. It is not accomplished without some resistance. Change is disruptive. What's also embedded in Frederick Douglass' life, of course, is how he was able to take advantage of his experiences, take advantage of his circumstances to really be able to convey the personal experiences that he had and use them to drive others to think about how to change the system. So, leaders, as a leader, how do I incorporate my personal experiences into the passion and the power of that passion? And certainly for Frederick Douglass, a lot of his power came from his physical presence, executive presence, his oratory skills, but not just from a surface standpoint. It's what lies beneath that presentation. So one of the things I think is also really striking is that Frederick Douglass had this ability to push people to the point of resistance, to push them to really understand the challenges in front of them, but also to leave a little bit of space for them to have time to absorb it. You get a piece of that in the speech that I'm referring to about the professing to favor freedom, because it actually ends in this way. He's talking to the audience and he says, "Sir, I have more than filled up the measure of my time. I have aimed, as I said in the beginning, to express a few thoughts having some relation to the great interests of freedom both in this country and in the British West Indies. And I have said all that I mean to say, and the time will not permit me to say more." It's really that last line that really strikes me as having the capacity and the read of an audience to be able to say, "I'm going to push you right to the brink, and I'm going to give you time and space to absorb what we just talked about." So lots of connections in there for me about lessons of leadership from Frederick Douglass. I really hope you like what I've shared with you, and actually I hope you'll share it with others. I think the thing that's probably even more important is that I hope this has stirred you to think about who would be an example for you of someone demonstrating the skills of leadership effectiveness. And perhaps even more important than that, I hope it's made you think of whether, if someone else was asked, who comes to mind as a person who demonstrates effective leadership, would that person think of you? So let me leave you with a drawing I did years ago of Frederick Douglass. And I look forward to connecting with you sometime in the future.